G'day people and welcome to the first tutorial in the EDM theory series. So the first thing we're going to look at is notes of the piano. So why do we learn notes of the piano? So you might not even play piano, you might play saxophone, you might play trumpet, you might play drums where you don't even play melody, you don't even play pitch. So why is it important to know? Well, in EDM, I guess the piano roll is our score. We don't really use notation in a traditional sense like other forms of composition do. So we need to learn the piano notes because that's how we actually display our pitch, display our notes on a piano roll. So that's why it's really important that we know them. So I'm going to tell you a story, I guess, of how I learned the notes of the piano. And it all started when I was in year 10, I think it was. Actually, year 9, I reckon it was. So I would have been about, 14 years old. And for my solo performance exam, I guess, in year 9, I needed to play one major scale. So I had no idea what a major scale was. I played the drums and that was my instrument, and had no idea how to play a major scale. So I went to a friend and he told me how to play a major scale, and he said, just play the C major scale. It's the easiest scale out there. And I was like, okay, what's that? What does that mean? So he said, look for the keyboard note to the left of the two black notes. And he said, that's C, okay? And if you learn what C is, all you have to do is hit every white note to the next note that's under the two black notes, and you'll have yourself a C major scale. So from here, I learned what C was, and then I could just go up alphabetically in the musical alphabet. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then I would have a C major scale. So that helped me learn my notes just by knowing where the C is on the keyboard, because then I can work it out using the alphabet what the other notes are. Okay, so what about the black notes? Well, the black notes, basically all of them have two different names, and that's going to sound really confusing, but they're either a sharp or a flat, okay? So it depends which way, I guess, the music is moving or what we're doing with the note, whether we're moving up or down. So the very next note, or moving from one note to the very next note, is what we call a half step. So if we move a half step upwards, so say if we move from C up a half step, that is now a C sharp, because we're taking the C and we're moving it up a half step, and then it becomes a C sharp. But let's say, I guess we're on D, okay, and we want to go down a half step. Now that same note becomes a D flat. Okay, so whether it's called a flat or a sharp depends on the key you're working in or just the context of the music overall. We'll talk about key signatures and things like that and scales and things like that a bit later on. So here's a graphic with all the notes labelled with the sharps and flats included. So this might sound a little bit confusing, moving up steps and down steps, but don't worry about it too much, because in EDM and making music on DAWs, it doesn't really matter. A C sharp and a D flat look the same, sound the same. It only really matters if you're worrying about notation and notating it on a proper score. But if we're using Ableton and we look at the piano roll, you'll see on the left-hand side that the C note is displayed, or it's labeled on each octave. And then if I move the mouse over each individual lane, you will see that the notes are labeled for you. So if you're really struggling to know or to see what the notes are, especially because it's displayed vertically and not horizontally like you're probably used to seeing a piano keyboard, this can help you just identify quickly the notes. Just note that I guess the black notes always are shown as sharps. So that's what I was saying before. It doesn't really matter about sharps and flats, so because they're all displayed, well, they look the same on a piano keyboard anyway, and that's the score we're using anyway. We're not going to be using flats and we're not going to be using sharps. I think the important thing to note is, though, that sometimes in the EDM course, if I'm working in a key like C minor, for example, I might say E flat, because that in the key of C minor, there's an E flat traditionally and not a D sharp, which is, I guess, this note here. So yeah, just note that sometimes when explaining things enharmonically, things sound different because you want to kind of use the proper language that you use when you're teaching theory. But yeah, just note that the note itself is exactly the same. D sharp and E flat are exactly the same notes. There's no difference between the two. So hopefully that didn't confuse you too much, and now you're able to identify all the notes of the piano keyboard, and we can move on to our next lesson.